Welcome to the Christie Taylor Show, and I am so excited. Woo, to be kicking off 2021, my first episode of the year with one of my dearest creative sister friends who I call truly a soul sister. That is going to be my girl, Chandra Kamara. Of course, she is an amazing writer and playwright, entrepreneur, educator, cultural event planner. She launched her company, Harkins House Productions, in March 2010 and has produced and directed two of her own original stage plays, For Women and The Man Store. Now, both productions were highly successful. Now, she was planning to produce her third production, Queen of the Wind, in 2020, but had to stop all pre production because of the pandemic. Now, she is currently revamping her creative projects and business ventures to adjust to our new reality. I want you all to welcome to the Christie Taylor Show my sister, Chandra Kamara. Hey, sis.
Hello. What's good? Thank you for having me. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. We have glided into 2021, and I am super excited to kick this off. Now, of course, we talked for hours. I mean, like we did a phone call recently that was almost 5 hours long.
Yeah, we were on the phone a very long time, just kind of trying to, solve the world's problems.
Yeah, so it's going to be kind of, challenging for us to condense it into bite-sized pieces. But I first want people to know who you are beyond the bio. Chandra Kamara, who is she?
I'm just a little black girl from Mississippi.
Just a little black girl from Mississippi.
A little black girl from Mississippi who, fell in love with reading at a very young age. Like maybe around 8, 9, or 10, I started being very interested in reading a lot. I read a lot of everything that was around the house, from Ebony magazine to Jet magazine to, my mom's Harlequin romance novels, later on Essence magazine and Black Enterprise. She actually got a subscription to Black Enterprise magazine because I asked her to. And so I just read everything. I went to the library and used to hang out in the library by myself, just, in the library with the card catalog. Most probably don't know anything about the card catalog.
They probably don't.
It was computerized though. Like they had two kinds. They had the kind that you actually had to pull the drawer open and
which is the one I'm more familiar with.
Yeah. And then they had the one where you had to sit there at the computer and kind of type it up and then write down the call number. But just hanging out in the library, just reading and listening to a lot of hip hop, coming from Mississippi, it wasn't a lot, available in the way of having a lot of extracurricular activities, so I just kept myself busy. I love to read. Like I have a very active and vivid imagination, and reading helped me with that. And then I started writing. First, I started writing rhymes, like I was supposed to be trying to be.
I was about to say hip hop influenced you greatly.
Greatly. It influenced me tremendously. And I really fell in love with the idea of writing when I started trying to write my own rhymes. So that it started from there, writing my own rhymes and kind of trying to be an MC. And then I went from that to writing poetry. And then it just kind of evolved from there.
Now, Chandra Kamara, do you remember your first rhyme?
No, I don't.
If so, I was going to try and put you on the spot, girl.
I'm glad you can. No, I don't. I don't remember my first rhyme. I just know that MC Light had a major influence on me.
Yeah, she's amazing.
She was like really at that particular, she was really pretty much at that time, honestly, like the female equivalent to Rakim. And so Rakim was like is in my top 5. Like he sits as the number 1 rapper at the top of my top 5. And so, and so MC Light is of course my favorite woman to see. And like I said, she was pretty much like the female version of Rakim. So I was very heavily influenced by MC Light. I remember my MC name though. My MC name was Champagne.
And Champagne.
Yes, but this is before, the strippers started naming themselves after liquor. So
Oh, well, tell me this. Okay, so were you MC Champagne?
yeah, I was MC Champagne, sometimes just Champagne. And I had a thing about knowing how to rhyme, how to spell out my name and make it rhyme like Big Daddy Kane. So I did know how to do that pretty well. So I
What did you find most intriguing about both MC Light and Rakim?
Rakim. Just the wordplay. The rhyme scheme, just
Mhm.
knowing how to really frame and hook the words together and still make sense. The delivery, being able to be both a storyteller and a lyricist,
Right.
just the ability. It was just the fascination with how well they took the words and the various rhyme schemes with the patterns of the words and the rhyme schemes, and then put them together. It was just dope. Like, what can you say? It was just something that coming out of the 80s and then growing up during that time where hip hop was really making its way out of New York and starting to spread to the rest of the country. It was just something that it inspired us all. It didn't just inspire me, it inspired an entire generation. And for those of us who come from that era, we tend to prefer lyricists a lot more than we prefer rappers who have the charisma and the personality and just know how to sell records. But that's really what it was. Rakim is a wordsmith, so it's MC Light. They knew how to master the language in such a way. And that mastery of the language was the same thing that I saw, like it being parallel to a lot of the people that I was reading as well.
Right, that's true.
Like Gloria Naylor and James Baldwin and Toni Morrison.
Gloria Naylor.
Gloria Naylor, Mama Day, Lyndon Hills, the women of Brewster Place, the men of Brewster Place. Yeah. Yeah, all of those novels. And it's kind of how their ability to tell a story, just that mastery of language was something that always impressed me. Just that ability to just take that language and take those words and to express them and to link them together in such a way where it really drew you into what they were saying. Because reading is a different experience than watching something on television.
Right.
You have to use words to create the images in your mind, as opposed to the images presented for you on a TV.
Now, Chandra, one of the things I know about you is that you are masterful when it comes to words and to naming things. And of course, I can definitely see, of course, a lot of those who've influenced you. But when it came to, like you said, rap was spreading from the East Coast, which of course is based in the griot culture and jazz and storytelling, right, historically speaking.
Sure.
To begin to migrate into the dirty South, Mississippi included.
Yep.
Came some of your more regional influences when it came to storytelling through the creative arts?
Outkast, A-Ball and MJG, who doesn't really get as much credit as they should.
That is so true.
For really being very influential with putting the South on the map. As a matter of fact, A-Ball and MJG came around before Outkast, right? And so Outkast took it further than A-Ball and MJG, but still A-Ball and MJG were the ones who honestly were like something of the pioneers or the forefathers of what became, Southern hip hop. The UGKs was a big influence on me too, because I love the UGKs. But definitely those three duos are the people that inspire me the most. Right now, I am 100% in love with Big Crit. Largely because he's from Mississippi, from Meridian, which is like not too far from my hometown. Well, that's a couple of hours south of my hometown, but definitely Big Crit, who I feel like is continuing in the actual in the tradition, in the groundwork that was laid by A-Ball and MJG and the UGKs and Outkast. He's continuing in that. Yeah.
Now, of course, that's a big jump between, because those artists that you're speaking of really were reigning in the 90s to now bring that up to what is now becoming, the early 2020s.
Mhm.
Have you seen and felt a void over the last, let's say, 20 years?
You know what? I used to be a diehard, hip hop purist,
Yeah.
and that's still in me. Like I still would prefer that all of the MCs that come out really understood the history of hip hop and really better understand the shoulders that they stand on. Um, and a lot of what I'm starting to see, honestly, is I'm starting to see a return to that. At one point in time, it had got very ridiculous.
It
It,
had. It had.
it had got really ridiculous, and it was just like people were just showing up out of the woodworks and just opening their mouths and getting on the record and saying anything, and you could literally tell that there was no there was a disrespect in a sense. They weren't trying to pay homage to anybody. It was literally about I just want to get in here and make some money. Because it's commodified now and it's commercialized, and I can
Right.
just really go on the record and just say the worst, the most ridiculous stuff ever, and somebody gonna feel it, right? Because it had become very mainstream.
Right.
Um, and it did. It had gotten ridiculous for a long time. But now I feel like now there's a lot of MCs like your Kendrick Lamar's, like your J. Cole's and all of them who are actually trying to stay true to the actual culture. So it seems like it's trying to make its way back around to, the actual storytelling aspect and the actual lyricism. Like somebody's actually put some thought into what they're trying to put on the record and what they're actually trying to say.
It's interesting that you name those because I personally, though I'm not a hip hop head, you and I joke oftentimes that while you were, and my brother, he's a little bit older than you, but he definitely was a hip hop head. He was even into breakdancing and all that.
At the church.
Missed out on the hip hop revolution because, as you will say, I was what?
You was at the church.
I mean, even before holy hip hop, I was in the church. I was
You were holy rolling.
I was totally rolling. I was totally. However, I have come to really appreciate, of course, having, at some point in my life moved into media, radio, and having to be exposed to a lot of.
Right.
I personally like this new vanguard of rappers and hip hop artists, and J. Cole is actually one of my favorites. Him in Black. I love them, and I love their storytelling. And then when I do,
I love that too.
I love him, and I actually have found myself, and thank God for YouTube because I can now do a lot of my research of what I missed out on. And I will say this: that even in the late '90s, I did. Ooh, let me tell you who I did slip and listen to. Of course, Will Smith. I did love him early on. LL Cool J.
Yeah.
Big Daddy Kane. But let me tell you, I was in love with to the point that I knew his real government name.
Yes. Antoine Hardy.
No, Heavy D.
Oh, Heavy D. I thought you were talking about Big Daddy Kane. Okay. I was giving you.
No. I've loved Will Smith, LL Cool J, Big Daddy Kane, or like if I hear their music, but who I actually started buying their cassettes on the low was Heavy D and the Boys.
Heavy D and the Boys they were very approachable. Like they were the kind of hip hop that you could actually play around your mama and not get in any trouble.
And that's probably why I could handle it.
My mama loved Heavy D. Like my mama thought that Heavy D was the cutest thing.
Wow.
She thought that he was just amazing. Like she loved we got our own thing and everything. Because that's what it was. They were the kind of group that you can actually play around your parents and everything. So yeah, I understand that. They were mainstream, but they weren't bubblegum, but they were still, the kind of artists that you could, like I said, they were more family oriented. And it wasn't a lot of cussing and it wasn't a lot of drug dealing and all of that.
And he had amazing storytelling and wordplay. Amazing.
Yeah. It was more wholesome, if you will, and for the better word for them. Mm-hmm. So, just say, folks, you can get away with listening to Heavy D and the Boys.
Well, I got away with it. And I have a lot of his cassettes, and I actually learned his name. And at some point when I was living in Detroit years ago in my 20s, I dated a guy because he reminded me of Heavy D.
Heavy D. See that?
Real story there. Real story. Because I wasn't into the light complexion back in the day. And I actually broke my color bias because of Heavy D. Ah,
Heavy D. How about
Heavy
that?
D, honey. Well, how now that we found love, what are we gonna do with it? Come on now.
Yeah.
Now,
My favorite
speaking
song
about,
is Got Me Waiting.
huh?
My favorite song by Heavy D and the Boys is Got Me Waiting.
Ooh, oh my God. Yes. That whole cassette. Well, did you see the cassette and CD? Yes, I said cassette.
Yeah, I was gonna let you slide on.
I had to say cassette. That's what I bought.
I know that's what you bought, girl, but you know.
We're all the way up to MP3s.
You know what I'm saying? We all the way up to streaming now. Like I don't even know.
Right. We don't even download. Right.
Who buys music these days? You know, so
I know who buys it. Now tell me this. Okay, now we're talking about those 90s, and we're talking about all of the ones that contributed to that, both around, the East Coast, Dirty South. And you talked about there being a period of time that seemed like anybody would jump on the mic and say anything. Now, oddly enough, you have not discussed the West Coast influence. So were there no that impressed you?
Oh, absolutely. But you asked me about my region. You went, we talked about New York first, then we went to my region, and now we can go ahead and go to the West Coast.
Okay, let's go West Coast. Let's go West.
Yeah, I really love DJ Quick, and I really love it's as misogynistic as it may sound, as a lot of his music may be. DJ Quick is one hell of a producer.
Yes,
his ear for music and stuff is really pretty deep. I loved The Far Side. She keeps on passing me by. That was my group. That's my group. Digital Underground.
Yes.
And of course, NWA.
Yes, gotta give them respect, all the respect.
Mm-hmm.
And even though, like I said, I wasn't like deep into hip hop in its origin years, just the political insight that they provided that literally was causing. I remember when Sister Souljah was raising Cain, and her existence was elevated because Bill Clinton I think he was running for re-election.
Yeah.
They put her in the spotlight, but she was very forthtelling. And a lot of things of that whole generation, they really were insightful to what was already happening in the ghettos of America, in the hoods, and now it's been amplified, and they were what we consider true griots.
Yeah.
I think
I want to jump something. Oh no, go ahead.
No, I was like, go ahead, finish that thought. I want to jump in this transition to the literary aspect of you. But when it comes to the fact that creative profits, really.
I think if there's anything that I really want hip hop to do now, current hip hop is to really tap back into being the voice of the people. I'm not to say that it's not happening, but I would like to see it on a grander scale. They have to understand when you speak of them being the griot or the storyteller or what have you. I don't know that all of them really understand the significance of what they do. I think that it's one thing to know how to rap. It's one thing to know how to, be an MC or whatever, but I do know that there is a need for more social commentary within the art. And I would just like to see more of that because, the conditions in which we live in are really not that much different than they were 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. So we still need to have the voice of the community still being spoken by those of us who are pretty much like the cultural translators, and that's your artists. Your artists are your cultural translators. Everybody can't do it. We get that. You do need your people. You do need your artists that are also all about the partying and the BS.
Right.
But you need a healthy balance too, and a harmonious balance of these artists who are just talking about weed and money and women, and those who are literally trying to make a statement, and they all need to be equally exposed.
Right.
That makes sense. Does that make sense?
It
Like,
makes a lot of sense because, of course, historically
we
speaking,
had a balance once upon a
yeah,
time. We had the artists that we knew was going to be somewhere kind of being like the hood news reporters for us. You know what I'm saying? And they were the ones that were speaking for us as well. You had your KRS ones, and you had your Public Enemy, right? But then you also had your Too Shorts and your
yeah,
E40s and your DJ Quicks, who at the same time was still giving you a piece of what life was really like.
that's
You know,
right.
had a wide range of things that was going on. Like you really understood the our generational experiences as Black people from the gamut of artists that we had available. You know what I'm saying? So we had like a wide range, and like right now it just seems like it's a little too uneven. And I just want a little bit more of a balance where we're seeing more artists who are more about social commentary, and they still get the same level of exposure as our others.
And I like the fact that you talked about the exposure piece because, of course, a lot of that plays into the commercialization of music, period. And
Mm-hmm.
historically speaking, we do know that anytime the capitalistic nature of America seeps into any form of art, it does begin to sanitize the message, the focus, the artistry. And I think that that's another reason why I'm really, really grateful for this new vanguard of musicians and singers and writers, period.
Right.
And I'm going to speak about Black music.
Mm-hmm.
That there are a lot of artists who probably were born in the 90s and early 2000s who have really, if I'll say, picked up the mantle of artistry in every genre of Black music. So I'm really, really grateful that there is that connection. And I do know that historically, it takes oftentimes things that are happening in the society that puts a lot of that. So, and speaking to that aspect of culture, I heard you use that word, and I know you're big on culture and not just doing it for the culture, but literally fostering both the past, the present to create a future.
Exactly.
To the literary people now, we talked a lot about the hip hop influences, which of course I know nurtured you as a artist and as a writer, and you are a playwright. So I know with the music being the soundtrack of your life, there were also, as you said, the books you were reading. Who were some of those authors as well as playwrights that you began to be drawn to as you've been nurtured by hip hop?
Tazaki Shange, my first um, my first theatrical production. That let me see how I want to say this, because I had been to plays before this, but the one that really struck me was the production of The Color Girl Who Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough. It was done by, I think, the Black Student Association back in 1994. I'm telling my age. At the University of Memphis. And I just remember just really being immersed into the dialogue that was happening, the monologues that was happening with each one of the women. It was well acted. You know, it was done by college students who were going to the school, but they did a really beautiful job of portraying those characters. And then, you know, just kind of really going and studying more about Tazaki Shange as a playwright. I really discovered her first as a playwright. Then I learned later that she was pretty much a poet and a novelist. But she was the first playwright that really stayed with me, and I just couldn't get out from under her influence. Like, she really influenced me greatly. And as you know, she is also very profound and a master of words and a gifted storyteller, and just know how to really speak from a very deep place
Mhm.
in her work, and then present it to you in such a way where it'll resonate with you. May she rest in peace.
I totally want to take this moment and acknowledge her spirit and her influence on a lot of us, including a lot of those that grew up in hip hop.
Yep.
She was a mother poet. And
yeah.
I totally, as a poet, as a writer, as a creative, you know, there were so many who came. I'll even go back as far as the Harlem Renaissance that really influenced us, whether we knew it or not.
Yep.
Once we began to be introduced to their works in the 90s and the early 2000s, you know, how much of an influence they have been. Now, you spoke about that one play, University of Memphis, and to be able to have the testimonials of women in their stories, which I know has always been very important to you in your own work. What particular character in that particular production or work spoke to you the most? Ooh, I know. It's so many layers.
The woman in green. And I think, see, I can't pick one. I just remember certain pieces, certain dialogue from the production that sticks with me all the time. Being a woman and being colored is a metaphysical dilemma that I haven't solved yet, or I haven't conquered yet. That was, you know, it was the lines, the way that she was, oh my God, who? You're stomping me now because I can't pick one. I really can't pick one. I do know that I love the poem about the choral poem, because that's really what they were. They were choral poems. And I really like the choral poem about somebody don't walk away with all my stuff.
Yes. And
how it speaks to, you know, this experience of being a woman, specifically a Black woman, and being in love, or to be in love, and having a man in your life that kind of shows up and take you out of yourself, and take you out of yourself to the point where what you have, the things that you have that are supposed to be yours, who make you who you are, end up getting put to the waist, put to the side. It's almost like they do it. It's a theft of certain kind. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't even know who I am anymore when I'm with this person. So somebody walk away with all my stuff, and I'm like, where he going with all my shit? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
That spoke to me. Wow. And then, you know, the very tragic story about Bo Willie Brown.
Yeah.
That was something that was, yeah. And then, you know, the line about, I found God in myself and I loved her fiercely.
Ooh, yes.
You know, so it's just different lines. In each one of those choral poems, there's something there's a line in there that's going to stay with you every single time. You know, there's no one. That's why I'm like, I can't pick one woman or one specific choral poem, because each one of them literally has something in it that I was able to take with me and say, that's like, I put that resonates deeply with me. And this is something I need to spend some time wrestling with, toying with, and really trying to better understand about my experience as a Black woman. So pick just one, really. It's one. It's something different. That's what makes it so amazing. That's what makes it so amazing.
And that's what makes it a masterpiece.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's something. She debuted the production in 1978, and here we are in 2020, and people are still doing productions of it.
That's right.
It just won't go anywhere, and it shouldn't.
Ever.
I agree. Yeah.
Now, Chandra, Kamara, I am so glad to have you here with me on the Christie Taylor Show. And we're going to now segue in just a moment on how all of this hip hop and amazing, masterful writers, poets, and playwrights have influenced your work and the launch of the Harkins House. We'll be right back after this. my soul sister, Chandra Kamara, and we have been really engaging in one of our heady conversations about the influence of all things creative. In her case, hip hop, amazing, masterful writers, essayists, playwrights. And I kind of want to jump to Chandra Kamara as a creative herself. Now, of course, you went to the University of Memphis and you majored in?
I majored in marketing management.
I love that because the journey to your creative expression and artistry. Woo! Okay, how can we condense this story?
I'm just going to say that I was writing. I love to write. I really wanted to write for a living, but I was literally terrified to try. So I had to do, it was the same thing like with me being a rapper. Like I was like, I can't be a rapper coming from Mississippi. No one is going to take me seriously. And then, going to college, I needed to get a degree so that I could get a job. So, it was all about just really trying to follow the social formula, because you hear all of the negativity about trying to pursue a career in art and how you'll be broke and starving and stuff like that. So the long story made short is that for a very long time, I was just terrified to do anything with my writing. It was just something that I would do at home. I would only let my friends see it. Never really want to try, wasn't really afraid and just scared to put it out there and let people, see it, strangers or whoever. And I just went to college and got a degree so I can get a job. And that's what happened. Mm-hmm.
And oddly enough, one of the jobs that you took led you into the entertainment industry in some form or fashion. Let's talk about that.
I started working in radio. I worked for Clouded Channel. No, I'm just playing. Clear Channel. Started working for Clear Channel Communications.
All the stories.
And at that time, it was WHR. Let me get my radio voice. It was WHRK, K97 FM, KJMS, Smooth 101 FM. At the time, it was smooth. Is it still good? Is it still Smooth 101? I don't remember.
It's V101 now.
See what I'm talking about? See, I don't even remember, because I'm listening to the radio. Isn't that crazy? But anyway, it was KJMS, Smooth 101.1 FM, WDIA, the oldest African-American station in the country, WDIA, 1070 AM, and at the time, KWAM, AM 990 The Light, which is now WHAL, Hallelujah FM, 95.7.
Graduation, baby.
Yeah. So that was the cluster of stations that I worked for. I was in the sales department, working as a sales assistant. Met you because
But before you met me, though, because I took your job. Well, you got your job, and that's how I got it.
I left and called myself, tried to move into working for an independent record label. Oh my God, that seems so long. It was a long time ago.
It was long ago. That was 1999 is when I actually received a call. Early that year, Michael Adrian Davis is an integral part of this story because I had met him when I, the whole DC, Tipton County, Millington, went away to school, ended up in Detroit, came back in the mid-90s.
Mm-hmm.
I was working at a station, and that's where I met Michael Davis. And years later, about 6 years later, he, gave me an opportunity to do some voice work that led to me starting that spring of 1999 on weekend on 990 The Light. But then when I got a call from Frankie Edwards,
Frankie,
that she was losing her sales assistant, and if I wanted the job because she had heard about, the fact I had some experience in that. And I think I had 2 or 3 days with a young lady who was leaving, and she was rapidly training me because she was ready to go. And that turned out to be Chandra Harkins. And it's so funny because who would ever think that our paths would cross years later and become friends, because you literally just was leaving a job.
I was.
And we had no other interaction past those 2 or 3 days of training.
Yeah. Well, I think that's
I think it was the portrait scene that Was it Precious? I don't know how we reconnected.
Ain't no telling. I mean, like I said, this story has so many different layers to it, so many different. It's not so much so many moving pieces. I don't think that we had a lot of moving pieces. I just think it was so long ago that we've kind of forgotten. Because
Well, I can say this, that I started a Clear Channel on 990 The Light on the weekends that May. By September, I received a call saying, would I be interested in the sales assistant position, because the current sales assistant is leaving to go back to grad school, which was a stretching of the truth. You were working on a master's, but that was not your full reason for leaving.
No.
It turns out. However, I think that would be the fall of '99, and I think we ended up reconnecting around the Precious Cargo years, maybe.
Well, you know, Precious Cargo came up in and around the time when Love Jones came out. So we're talking about around 96 on up through to 99. Yeah, so that's probably about right. During the Precious Cargo era, yeah.
And then I think at some point we met again.
Mm-hmm.
And I know Twitter became a part of that story. And it was around that time you had done the independent record label with the name that we would not drop.
We will not.
But by the time I reconnected with you, you were working in corporate America, or should we say
the corporate slum? Yes, I was there.
And somewhere in that time, which would have been the mid 2000s.
Yeah.
You had started writing.
Okay. So yeah, I think, you know, we definitely, when you talk about Precious Cargo, so there was the poetry scene, right?
Yes.
So there was that poetry scene that was really popping off at that time.
And I was a poet, and I knew it.
And that was the time when I was patronizing the poetry scene and really and, you know, by working in radio, you start running into all these people who are involved in the art scene, right? So you start running into all of the singers, all of the rappers, all of the producers, all of the writers, all of those folks, and started, you know, just kind of moving around in those circles and everything. So I started meeting a lot of people, and I think that's pretty much how we reconnected, because we were just in that scene, moving around in that circle together. And so,
knowing Chandra, she probably came up to me and saying, "Do you remember me? I trained you for that job."
You know, something I don't even really know specifically how, but definitely because we were just involved in that whole circle, and being involved in that whole circle, we were just bound to run back into each other again, and that's what we did. And then, you know, I just started coming up to the station and visiting you while you were on the air and things like that. It just kind of went from there. And I think we pretty much, because we always been idea people. Like every time we get together, we're always talking about ideas. We're always talking about stuff that we want to see happen. We're always trying to do something. So it was just that kind of connection where every time I saw you and every time you saw me, we would start politicking, and we would just start talking about what we wanted to see and what we were working on. And that just kind of really went from there. That's how the circle really built itself. So
it's a beautiful union, because a lot of the things that we would talk about at first, we were like, "Oh, we wish this was happening here," because Love Jones is my favorite movie. So a lot of the artsy work that was coming out in those late 90s and early 2000s, you know, because we had done the Boys in the Hood, you know, vein, still birthing out of hip hop, but then we started moving into Black romance and Black love, you know, works. And for a lot of us in the creative circles, we were like, I wish we could have that in Memphis. And eventually, two things happened with you specifically. I think corporate America, corporate slums was draining your creative energy, and you created an opportunity, or even let's just talk about Harkins House. You started saying, instead of let's talking about it, we both, I think by the mid 2000s, like, let's start making this stuff happen.
Yeah. So Harkins House was founded in 2010, and I was still at the corporate slum at the cubicle farm, just wasting away, you know, feeling.
And the conversations I was in radio. However, a lot of my creativity is way beyond the microphone, so I could hear you like, oh. And I was like, oh my God, how can my friend get free of this? Because it's like
agonizing. It was agonizing. It was, let me see, where was I working in 2010 when I started? Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah. I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem with saying the name. I don't. Like, you know, I won't say the name of the record label. That'll remain nameless. But, you know, at 2010, I was down at AutoZone and I was wasting away at AutoZone. I don't have no problem with telling people that. Like, I worked at AutoZone corporate for about 7 years. Whew. I also went back to grad school. I did go back to grad school. And actually, by the time 2010 came around, when I started Harkins House, I had finished my master's degree. Because I think I got my master's degree in 2007. And so my whole goal was working on how to transition out of corporate America because I knew it wasn't for me. And I knew that I didn't want to continue to wake up every day and go into a job and sit in a cubicle for 8 hours. And literally just knew that I was more than that, you know. And so Harkins House came about as a way of really kind of just stretching out and giving me something that it was therapy for me. You know what I'm saying? It was therapy for me to write. I was still writing. And then I was like, you know, it's just time to go ahead and see what I can do with this. And I knew that being a playwright here locally and not really having a lot of opportunities available to me to be able to shop a play and do a workshop and all that kind of stuff. And I've always been very protective of my creative work, and I've always wanted to remain in creative control. So I just said, this is something that I'm going to do on my own. And at that time, my timing couldn't have been better because once I started Harkins House and after I had finished writing for women, the Evergreen Theater came on board. Like, they launched the Evergreen Theater as a community theater that was available to people like me. And so I was one of the first people to actually do a production at Evergreen Theater. And I debuted for women in November of 2010. And it was a pretty profound, not profound, it was just a very, what's the word I want to use? It was something so, you know, something so predestined about it all. Because in November 2010, it was like For Color Girls that came out as a movie.
Yes, that's so true.
And they had
Perry.
They had just debuted Black Girls Rock on television. So Black Girls Rock had debuted in November of 2010. For Color Girls had came out, and then my play For Women had debuted. So I just felt like I was a part of this larger sweeping artistic wave that was happening at the time. And it just was very validating for me and letting me know that this was something that I was supposed to do. And I was like, this is beautiful. Put the play on, paid for the theater out of my corporate money.
That's what they're good for.
You know what I'm saying? So I just really used that money to fund my dream, you know, to really fund the production. The company, I was like, I'm gonna do this through my own company. Everything was just sweat and equity. You know, it was sweat equity, rather. That's the word I want to use. It was sweat equity. It was just moving on passion. Everything paid for itself by passion and sweat equity. And that's how that play got done. And I did it again in August of 2012. And I had written another play, The Man Store. I had started on it, I think in 2012, late 2012. And then it was ready to go. And I debuted The Man Store in May of 2013.
That's right.
And then I did it again in November of 2013.
And it's interesting because at some point in 2008, I left radio, and in the spring of 2009, like by May of 2009, I had returned back to Oral Roberts University. So from 2009 to around that time, I was between Tulsa and LA, but we kept in touch. Yes, social media, Skype, eventually Google Hangout.
Everything. Twitter.
We had some Twitter friends. We started a writing club, a writing lab club, and it was very, very productive. And we're about to resurrect that in 2021.
Absolutely. Yep. Got to.
But what was beautiful was the timing of when I came back home. You were restaging The Man Store, and you even said, okay, Christie, can you open up
Yeah, you hosted it. Yep.
I was like, sure. And when I tell you when I watched it, I was like, this is worthy of Broadway. It is worthy of a national tour. It just amazing work. And I've always said, as we had become writing friends, writing sisters via long distance and Skype, and that you write like molasses. Oh my God. And you're like, why do you say that? I was like, it's just so thick. It's like when I grew up in Tipton County and they would make, especially on the weekends, and they make that big breakfast, that homemade biscuits and molasses straight out the tree and with that rice and salmon. And it's like, girl, your writing just feels like a hearty, I mean, just beautiful family, but sensuous, spiritual, mystical. Just so much of your work is black magic. It's black girl magic. It's black magic and black girl magic. It's it's our power in a very beautiful, sensuous way with a lot of intellect. It's like the best of ourselves at its rawest. That's the best way I can say it.
I do appreciate that, because that just speaks to what I'm really aiming for. Like, I want to write like the people that I idolize, in a sense. Like, I want to have the same kind of, effect as a Toni Morrison, as a Gloria Naylor, as a Tazaki Shange, as an Alice Childress, as a Zora Neale Hurston. So I try to, and I know that comes from, in one part, just really knowing how to master the language, of course, knowing how to string the sentences together, like the actual technical writing part. But it also has to come from the heart. You got to write from your heart and your soul. And you have to be okay with being vulnerable. And you have to be okay with allowing yourself to explore whatever you need to explore within yourself, and then just make it happen through your writing. I think a lot of us, sometimes when it comes to our art, we hide, and that's the wrong place to go. Like, if there's any place where you should be completely exposed, it should be through your work, through your artistic work.
Amen. Amen. I love it. Now, speaking about your work, you have had a chance to do a stage reading.
I did. Yeah.
To stage it in 2020. You had a staged reading of a work that, as I've been doing some script consulting, oftentimes I read people work and I'm like, oh God, oh kind of. You sent me something just as a, hey, Christy, check this out. This is something I wrote. And when you told me the time frame, it was such a compressed amount of time that you took to write it, and yet it was perfection. And I was laughing and crying and just deeply moved by that work. Let's talk about that, and then I want to find out what you're going to be doing in 2021.
So that work is called Queen of the Wind. I wrote it in 24 hours. It was therapy for me. It was a catharsis of sorts, because I had just experienced a personal situation here in my home. My home was vandalized in April of 2017, and as a way of kind of coping with that and other things that was going on in my life, I just started writing, and it just came to me, and I just wrote it, and it just flowed out, and I didn't stop it. Like, it just literally just came, and I just wrote it. It was nothing. It didn't have I didn't know I was going to write it. I didn't have no preliminary idea that I was going to write it. I didn't have no character in mind when I wrote it. It came to me one day, and I just sat down and I just started writing, and I couldn't stop writing until it was finished. And I wrote it within 24 hours, and it was a done deal. And I was like, okay, read this.
It was perfection.
Yeah.
That was one of those moments when you, as a creative, you have allowed yourself to be a conduit to the infinite creative one, and you really surrender to that. It was also at a time that I think you were surrendering to the full journey.
Mm-hmm.
Not only were you trying to be a playwright and had stood up your own, production company, but you were like, I'm going to make this a career. Even though you had made some, career changes professionally from corporate to education.
Yeah.
I think it was really like, even now, like a midwife in your life.
Sure.
Which I
Yeah.
know is some of the things you're going to be moving into as we get into 2021. Some of the things you have written down and we've talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look forward to discussing that and seeing what that's going to be like. So, what is one thing that you can, in our wrap up, share with us that can be shared?
That can be shared. Yeah.
That can be shared.
Yeah. I'm working on something called the Literary Lightworker. And the Literary Lightworker was something that just, again, I remain just very open to, you know, I, how do I explain this without it really sounding so extra deep? I don't think there's any other way to really explain it. Like, I remember I'll do this and then I'll go back to that point. I remember watching Toni Morrison's documentary, and I remember her saying that she was struggling with a character in a story that she was working on. And Toni Morrison lives in this house that's out by a body of water. She did. And she said that she looked out her window and she saw a woman come out of the water. And she described the dress that the woman was wearing, and she described the hat. And she said this woman sat down on this bench that was out in front of her house. And that's how she got the answer that she needed for the story, Beloved. And I just remember I remember being very inspired by that and I felt very assured. I was like, oh, good. So wonderful. Now I can actually go around and tell people too that I feel like it's an ancestral thing when it comes to me and my writing. Like, I really do feel like there are ancestors explaining these stories to me, giving these stories to me, telling me to do these things. And like you said, I act as a conduit. So just listening to Toni Morrison tell that story when she was writing Beloved, that gave me license to really just start explaining to people that that's kind of how it works for me. Like, everybody, when I write a play, the people are in front of me. You don't see them, but they are definitely in front of me. They're talking. They tell me what they're wearing. They tell me what they're doing. And all I do is write it down. And that's literally all I do. Like, I just write it down. Like, I try my best to try and structure things and to do the cute little, because I didn't go to school for writing, right? So I try to do this little structure thing that they tell us to do about having the outline and all that kind of stuff. But it just doesn't work for me that way. The way that writing works for me is literally I'll just start seeing people saying things, talking about what they want to do. They give me their story, and I just literally just hammer it out on the laptop. Sometimes I'll write some things down that they'll tell me that they want, and they come and they go. They come and they go. So I said I meant to say this. The Literary Lightworker is really about, it's going to be something because I love to read. And not only do I love to read, but I love to talk about what I get from my reading. I love to talk about the themes that I see in readings and everything. So the Literary Lightworker is really going to be something that is going to give you more of my mind and my thinking process about art and about writing and about the world. That's really what the Literary Lightworker is, and I'm going to try my best to connect it to things I've read. That's pretty much what it is. It's going to be me connecting the things that I talk about with what I've read. Like, I might take an article, a journal article or something, because I actually read journal articles like I'm still in college. I'm weird that way. Like, I still be all up in the journal articles. I got a friend of mine that actually works in the college, and I use his credentials to log into the school library, so I can be up in there and find the journal articles and different stuff. You know what I'm saying? And so I still do scholarly journal articles, and when I read them and everything, it makes me think about the larger impact that what I've read has with the world. And the Literary Lightworker is going to be doing that in a fun and engaging way. So
I absolutely love it. Oh, the ancestors are so proud of you. Your ancestors
are so
proud of you.
I hope so. I want them to be. You know what I mean?
As we guide and slide and dive into, I just kind of feel that's like the spirit of 2021. 2020 was definitely a year of pivoting and challenge and a lot of inner growth if we took advantage of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think 2021 is going to give us an opportunity. Again, each year gives us opportunities to further explore those things that we unearthed. And I know that you have been on a creative journey, and I'm so looking forward to seeing what you release to the world. I am so looking forward to it. And now that we're into this more virtual space, all of us are learning how to use technology and various platforms to communicate to the whole world as opposed to just our block or just our community or just our city. So
Yeah.
I'm super excited. Now, for those who want to keep up with my soul sister, Chandra Kamara, first and foremost, you want to go to her website, one of many, but her primary website is harkinshouse.net. That's house.net, which is named in honor of her father, who passed in
2019.
Also, to keep up with her inner thoughts, be sure to follow her on Instagram at Chandra Kamaria. That's at Chandra Kamaria on Instagram. That is where you will get a chance to get to know her in very deep, intimate, personal ways. She's a beautiful soul, someone that I deeply love, and I'm so happy, Chandra.
I love you too.
Come on the Christie Taylor Show.
I just really appreciate you for having me. Thank you so much. Seriously.
All right. And I'm so proud of us because we have remained within an hour because, you know, we could for hours. For hours. We're going to have to actually possibly do something on Facebook Live where we just, you know, in addition to your literary light worker, just to have a very deep conversation about all things. All right, then. Well, thank you so very much for part of the Christie Taylor Show.
Okay. Thank you.
And I guess that's our signal that it's time to go.
Yeah, that's all right.
I know our intentions and our resolve for this year is for creating more content and releasing it to the world. That's what we're created and born to do. So I know I salute you and encourage you, as I always have and always will, to keep creating in any way I can help. Anyway.
Yes. All right. Love you too.
And we thank you all for checking us out here on the Christie Taylor Show.